What's up, everyone? Hopefully, everyone is having a good day thus far. Still somewhat in the morning here on the west coast of the US, but I'm sure many of you are already well into your day. So, there's a couple topics I wanted to cover off on today's live show, just keeping it pretty chill. Did get up a few movie reviews this morning. If you are into the whole like black horror comedy, psychological horror comedy. Hopefully, the movie reviews that were put up this morning are well down your alley. We did do The Voices from 2014. Again, I know it's a bit of an older film, but I think with many more people joining the horror genre, fairly new to it, it might be something that you haven't seen yet, even though it is an older horror film with Ryan Reynolds. Definitely worth checking out. I would also recommend Villains, somewhat of a newer film with Bill Skarsgård and Micah Monroe. So make sure you check out those reviews, check out those films, let us know what you think. Otherwise, like I said, just a few topics today, and also I want to cover off on as it relates to box office results lately. Specifically, something I noticed when it came to Wolfman, the most recent release that came out in January. I was looking at a couple of other films as far as how their box office results were looking, and they've been out for like a week or two, and the drop-offs on the second week are pretty bad. And I'm not sure if it's just the horror film itself, if it's really all films right now in general at the box office, but I wanted to look at Wolfman specifically and then compare it to two other horror films that have recently come out to see if we should expect something similar as far as we see the drop off happening, but should we expect the same as far as a quick turnaround for VOD? So we're going to take a look at that as well, and also a recent film that's going to be getting done. That's going to be a one-shot take. Now, I enjoy one-shot takes, and as far as an entire film being able to do that, I think that's something pretty remarkable to do an entire film in a one-shot take. I remember one of the first ones I saw was in Goodfellas, the Copacabana one shot. I think that was just one of the most perfect shots in that film and in films in general. But again, having an entire film done that way, especially a horror film, I'm all for something new. You don't see that often. So we're going to get into some of these articles and some of these details, and then we'll start going into what my thoughts are. So as I mentioned, the one shot take. So we have this article that came out yesterday, about midday or so. Exorcism horror movie Bury the Devil was shot in a single take. Now, you all know I love horror. I love horror films, but I love the subgenre, and I've said this many times before, around exorcisms, demonic possession, religious horror. I just happen to be, I don't know what it is about that subgenre. I just love anything to do with it as far as those films go. So as you can imagine, then like The Exorcist is one of my favorite franchises. Even Part Two, I know Exorcism, or The Exorcist Part Two, the Heritage, the Heretic actually is not something many people like. Many people don't even really consider it a true sequel to the original film. Many people think The Exorcist Part 3 was a more true sequel, and is really something that where you jump from the first to the third film. Even though Linda Blair was in the second film, I know many people don't necessarily like it as a direct sequel. So this here, though, I'm happy to see an exorcism film that's going to be a one-shot take. And what I found interesting was some of the details in the article here. We know last year's Infection Freakout Mads, which you obviously need to stream on Shudder, which it is on Shudder still, so make sure you check it out if you haven't seen it. The upcoming horror film Bury the Devil was reportedly shot in a single unbroken take. And I do believe, down here in the quote, the film depicts the most harrowing 90 minutes of our protagonist's life, and I felt that the most versatile way to really feel this was to do a single shot film. We are with her with every step and misstep she takes. So I like the fact that they are gonna follow that from beginning to end. I don't think we've ever really seen an exorcism an exorcism film done this way before, which I'm really excited for, especially seeing it from that perspective. I mean, you're always really the third party looking at it, but to really see it from their view, I think this could be something pretty good, and I would like to see this maybe turn into a slight trend, but not too big of a trend, where we get an abundance of single shot take horror films. Again, it's not something that's been done that often, so I am ready for it and willing to see more films done this way. I just don't want us falling into the trap of, and I know there's a lot of people that love this subgenre. I know a lot of people love the found footage subgenre, where someone's either holding a video camera or a phone, and we're constantly seeing it from that perspective. Now, while I do like some found footage films, I feel like once we got a couple of them in the late 90s into the early 2000s, we seem to have had a break from them, but they came back in such a big surgence of found footage films where it almost felt like overkill, no pun intended, but it just felt like we were just getting more and more of them, and they were just getting almost worse and worse as far as the quality, as far as the care that goes into these found footage films. And I think some of them are just money grabs, just to, then they throw on the tag on there, based on true events or based on a true story, really just to get you to think, oh, this really happened, I gotta go see it. And that was very much the shtick of the first Blair Witch Project, right? Many people thought that was very real. I remember even one of the mothers of one of the actors was constantly being contacted and sent even flowers as condolences, as far as what happened to her child, and she had to constantly say this isn't real, it wasn't real, it was just a movie. And that, I think that set off a trend that eventually picked up to the found footage subgenre. Again, I have no problems with it, but I think we got a little bit too much of it. Now with this single shot take, or a one shot take horror film, we only have maybe a small handful of examples of this being done. Now this would be another one. So I know some people don't necessarily like this, seeing a film from this perspective, but I don't think there's enough evidence to really say, or enough examples to really say whether or not it would or wouldn't work as something that could potentially create its own subgenre within horror, the single shot take, or the one shot take. So I am excited to see this. Now, we don't have any details. As you can see, it's a very short article just reporting that it's being said that this is a single unbroken take for this film. Now, we don't have any news as far as when this film's coming out, as far as any teaser trailers or trailers as of yet, but this will be something I'll be keeping an eye on for. I mean, even if it wasn't a single shot take, the fact that it's just an exorcism horror film, I would have been in for it just on that alone. I would have been interested to see it. But this has me now even more intrigued to see where this could go for this film, but also where it could possibly take the genre and again, creating its own subgenre for horror films. So very interested to see where we go from this one. Hopefully we get it this year, but I'd imagine based on the limited information, this might be a late 2025, more likely though an early 2026 film, just because again there's been so much that hasn't been shared about it as far as synopsis and everything. So we'll have to wait and see on this one. Now, moving on to this. Now, I am seeing a surgence of these types of films. And I say these types of films as it relates to home invasion. Now, we did just do a recent trailer review on a film called Intruder that's supposed to be coming out this year. There's been several of these that have also taken place, over the past several years. Now, I do think, though, now that we're getting another one called Obey, I'm interested to see where this subgenre goes. Hey, Kingdom of Nerds, how's it going? See you there in the chat. Doing pretty good. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're also doing well, my friend. We'll need to connect sometime. So I still know what you did last summer. Director Danny Can to helm home invasion horror Obey. Again, we've seen a uptick in these types of films, this subgenre of home invasions. And like I said, we just did a trailer review on Intruder. We have Obey coming. Now this Obey film is going to be getting done. Now, like I was just mentioning, I've seen many of these films done in the past. If you all remember, there was, I mean, I remember one of the first ones. I don't know if it was necessarily called, I think it would fall within a subgenre of um, home invasion or intruder films, like Panic Room, Jodie Foster. That was one, right? I mean, that's an older film, but still, I think it would fall within this subgenre. Now, again, I'm all for new ideas, and I've said this before. I love new ideas. I love new things, especially in the horror space. I don't like to continually see non-stop slasher films or non-stop, just repeat sequels or repeat remakes and reboots. I welcome new ideas, fresh ideas, new stories. However, as I was literally just mentioning about the found footage subgenre, they're great when they first start off, but once I think when studios start to see the success of that type of film style, then they just seem to want to throw everything at it. It's like they care more about the quantity versus the quality of the films coming out. So then next thing you know, we're seeing like VHS is one of them, right? We saw a surge of sequels there. Even Paranormal Activity. Now, Paranormal Activity is kind of, I think, a cross between found footage and then, of course, much of it jumps back from found footage to showing you security camera footage. So I'm going to place that whole franchise in the found footage, and even that got, I think, what, 5 or 6 sequels in itself. Did it really need that? No. But at least what they were doing was they kept trying to build off the original story, kept adding to it. Now, I don't think it necessarily worked. I think the first film was great because it was something we hadn't seen before. Second film, okay, you would expect it's going to get a sequel because of how successful the first one was. But for whatever reason, these franchises start to gain their own niche as far as a following, and then that following doesn't care really, I think, to a degree, on the quality of the film and the story. They just care they're getting another film to that franchise, and they're willing to support it no matter how bad the film is going to be. So of course studios are going to keep churning them out and putting money towards them. And I think that's exactly what's happened to the Saw franchise. Now, I mean, we were supposed to get Saw 11 this year. Now, rumor has it we may not get that this year. It may not come out until 2026. Now, that's not really a sentence I think you would think you'd be saying in 2025, Saw 11. I think the first Saw was great. Again, something we hadn't seen before. It was a fresh, new idea. Saw 2, again, you would expect a sequel because of how successful the first one was. But then once you start getting down the line, 3, 4, 11, we're at number 11. And I would say this is true for any franchise, even the picture behind me for Halloween. I don't necessarily think all those sequels were needed. But again, people are going to go watch them. Studios are going to keep making them, and they're going to keep making money. So whether or not we find ourselves in these continual traps of subgenres where it's found footage, or now, like I said, I feel like we're starting to see an uptick as it relates to the home invasion or the home intruder. I guess that's the name I would give the subgenre, because now we have this film Obey coming out. Now, again, if the trailer is on fire and it's a good story and it's a good scare, it's a good horror film, I'll support it. I'll support any horror film. I'll give it a chance to convince me it's good. It's just a matter of how many more now films are going to follow suit where it's going to feel like, wait a minute, didn't we just get Obey? Didn't we just get Intruder? Now I'm feeling like I'm just seeing the same thing, just with different actors, different actresses, and a slight change in story. But the premise is the same. You're someone's stuck in their house, or someone breaks into somebody's house, they torture them. Now it's a matter of how do they escape, or how do they now, save themselves, right? It's just going to be like a rinse and repeat cycle of these films that we keep seeing over and over again. But like I said, hopefully this is not a kickoff of something like that, whether it's, like I said, the home invasion or the home intruder subgenre of horror. I'm hoping we don't see that. Now, one of the more interesting stories I saw pop up today was this one, and everyone's talking about Scream. Everyone's focusing on Scream 7, primarily because of all the casting we've been getting around Scream 7. It seemed for a while there, it seemed like every other day we were getting a new casting, a new update. And I know that's been covered extensively by some of the other many channels out there that are supporting the horror genre. But this one specifically, it's been talked about, but this But he recently came out with Scott Foley recently came out with a quote that then ties into a theory that I have as far as his return and as far as the character Stu returning as well for Scream 7. So I'll bypass all this stuff. I mean, this talks about Scream 3, the fact that it's reaching its 25th anniversary. I want to jump down to the specific quote that he gave. He kind of misquotes himself a bit here as well as it relates to the film he was in. But he specifically says here, I just had a conversation with Kevin Williamson, who's wrote the first Screams, is directing this one. And he wanted me to come back and play a small part. And I was so excited to sort of revisit this character, even though he died in the first one. Now, I believe when he says the first one, meaning the first film that he was in, which was Scream 3, not the actual first Scream film, because that character wasn't there. But the fact that he says, I have to come back and play a small part. Play a small part. That's the thing I want to stick to as far as this quote goes. And my theory on Roman's return and Stu's return as it relates to Scream 7. As far as like Lillard, Stu, Mocker. I don't think they're going to be in this film, like it's a small part here, as far as coming back as their characters in true form. I mean, Roman was shot in the head in Scream 3, so I don't see how they could even tie into the fact that they would bring him back unless they were to somehow ignore Scream 3 altogether and then bring him in as Roman, but in a different sense, right? I don't see that happening either. My theory is Roman and Stu's characters will potentially be one of two things. They're going to be hallucinations of Sidney and potentially Gale as well. Or if you remember in Mission Impossible 3, when they started introducing the latex mask where they could literally take, and Tom Cruise was putting on this mask where he could take over the identity of the villain in Mission Impossible 3. I'm thinking it could be something like that, where we're meant to believe someone is using a silicone mask or silicone mask and they put it on, and then the actor themselves, Lillard or Foley, are going to be playing that character, right? So it's more true to form. I think it's either going to be that or hallucinations. And Kingdom of Nerds, or it could be a flashback as well. But I think if it's going to be a small part, and if you think the evolution of the Scream series, right, as far as how it's laid out, especially the kind of rebooting of the franchise with the Scream 5 and so on, I think the silicone mask would be the more up-to-date 2025 way to go about this, where someone gets somehow Stu's 3D dimensions of his face and makes a mask, puts it on, and now Sidney and Gale and everyone else is meant to believe that Stu is actually back when he's not. Same thing with Roman. Someone creates this mask, they put it on, they dress up like Roman, and he's not really there, but the actor is going to be playing the character. So I think that's my theory on how these two characters are going to be coming back. And even though he's saying that Roman's going to play a small part, that might just be the small part, whether it's like a 10 to 15 minute window where Sidney believes and Gale believes that Roman is somehow back, that somehow he survived, and somehow Stu survived as well, and they are still tracking them down to kill it. They are the Ghostface killer. Which then, if they are now going to the police or going to other people saying, I just saw Stu or I just saw Roman, right? It's going to make them, hey, you're crazy, Sidney, you're losing it. Gale, you're losing it, right? So where people won't want to believe them. And then the real Ghostface killer or killers, start to do whatever they're going to do, which we don't even know who that's going to be at this point. So that's my prediction. That's my theory on how Scream 7 will play out for both the Stu and Roman character. Now, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Again, it's just a theory. We don't know exactly why they're coming back, what degree they're coming back. I don't think they're coming back to play a completely different character. That would just be, in my opinion, nonsense, especially Stu's character since he was in the original film. But again, that would be my theory on why these two are coming back. And again, they would, as he's pointing out, they're going to be small roles. They're not going to be of that much substance, I believe. It's just really to drive Sydney and Gail's characters crazy or have them believe that they're back and they're really not. So, all right. So one thing I did want to look at, and this is my, I don't know, gripe about recent box office results for horror films. And I don't know if this is just part of the business model or if this is what's driving a business model within studios for horror films. And this could be happening amongst other films, but I don't think it is because I see it more so with horror films. But again, not saying it's not happening with other films. But I want to take a look here real quick. Wolf, and this was the week of January 24th through the 26th. It was that weekend. And if we look at Wolfman, its second week out, this was the second week results. It had a 70% drop its second week. That's a big drop its second week. And again, I'm focusing just on horror. There's other films on here that had big drops. But again, I just want to focus on horror and the fact that it was its second week. This film came out in mid-January, and when I looked at the calendar. Within, I think, 2.5 weeks, it was on digital. That's a pretty quick turnaround for a film that was being given a lot of marketing, was giving a lot of push to say, hey, this is going to be great. It's really supposed to resonate with the whole monsters universe with Wolfman again. It came out, and a lot of people have really given this film a lot of hate. And I'm wondering if the rationale to drive it to digital in 2.5 weeks after its release was that 70% drop on week 2. Now, I'm using this as a theory because, and you look at the number of theaters it was in a lot of theaters. Now, if we look at, and this is where I'm going with this, so stay with me. If we look at, again, this was the weekend of 24th through the 26th of January. If we look at Presence, which was a new horror film, it's a new horror film, came out this year. It was supposed to be, I haven't seen it yet, but it's my understanding is it takes on, you're looking at it from the perspective of the entity or the evil spirit that's in the film. That's the perspective of how this film is playing out. This was week 1, made 3 million, or the weekend of the first weekend, 3.3 million. Okay, so if we now, and that was of the 24th through the 26th, right? So if we go back, let's go back forward. So if we go back to weekends, and let's look at January 1st through the 2nd. Now let's go find, now you see Presence? Again, another big drop, 60%. At week 2, so very close to exactly what's happened to Wolfman. And if you saw, and even Wolfman's third week, it still had another huge drop of 64%. Now I'm wondering if, and then this same weekend here, Companion came out, had its first weekend of 9.3 million. Okay, first weekend. My question for Presence is 60% drop. Now, if we go back to the weekends again. And let's take a look at the following one after the 31st. So the most recent one we'd have would be the February 7th through the 9th. Now, look at Companion. Again, another big drop. Almost as high as Wolfman is its second week, right? So let's go see if we can. And Presence, even a bigger drop, a much larger drop from week 2 to week 1. And look at the number of theaters it was pulled out of. I don't know if it, again, and then Nosferatu, rightfully so, was going down, but Nosferatu's been out for, this would be 7 weeks at this point. But if you look at even Wolfman, another big drop, but again, that's already out on digital, so that would explain that as well. But as far as when we look at Presence and look at Companion, these huge drops that they're taking, especially for horror, and with Heart Eyes just now coming out, was the first weekend. Now, Heart Eyes might get a pickup because we're coming into Valentine's Day weekend, so this might be a film, if you're a horror fan, that you might go see on Valentine's Day or Valentine's Day weekend. So this one might not have a big of a hit, but I'm seeing a trend so far in 2025 when it comes to horror films, when you see from their first to second week, and even their third week, the drop-offs. Are we going to see now a further trend in the business model of film, especially for horror films? They come out, if they have these big drops, we're giving them 2, maybe 3 weeks tops to be in theater, and then we're sending them right to VOD, right to digital for purchase or rent on various platforms. I'm thinking that could be a trend this year, especially for horror films, if many of the horror films don't hit big. Now, I think obviously when we get to the point in time when Scream 7 comes out, I don't see like Scream 7 having this issue. I do see it having a drop. But because Scream is an established franchise and it has a major following, and the casting that's coming along with Scream 7, I think it's going to be out there for quite a bit. But my concern is, though, if we keep seeing a trend like this for horror films, I mean, we have 3 examples already in the first, what, month, not even month and a half of 2025, between Wolfman, Presence, and Companion. First week's okay because we don't have much data to go on, but second week, 60 to 70% drops and being pulled from a huge number of theaters. I mean, right? I mean, Presence here at the third week again, the drop off was even bigger and pulled out even more theaters. So, what incentive do these studios have to keep these in, and what do the theater companies, whether it's Harkins, AMC, or whatever your local theater is called, to keep these films, especially horror films, using up their screens if they're going to keep seeing these big drop offs? Now, while I don't want to see that, I don't want to see that for the horror genre as far as films not being successful in theaters. But I do think what this might do is drive more horror films to be just put right to VOD or drop in select theaters and drop to VOD at the same time, which again, I've mentioned this before. I think that's going to hurt horror films just as much because people would rather stay home, rent it for $4.99 or $7.99 versus paying a higher ticket price and going through the whole concessions, the drive to and from a theater, dealing with other people. They'd rather just say, hey, I'll just rent it at home. I have a decent setup. I'll experience here and move on, right? So I'm going to keep an eye on this as far as my interest goes, but the fact that again, Wolfman, Presence, Companion, and I have a strong feeling Hard Eyes will be the 4th film that's going to suffer from this. Is we're seeing horror films, start off decent first week, and then for whatever reason, and Companion, I've heard nothing but good things about. I haven't heard as many good things, or really anything about Presence, but Companion I've heard good things about. Wolfman I think is kind of a split. I think many people like Wolfman, and many people just completely dislike it, didn't think it was a good film, and keeping in mind, Wolfman, the film we got, was not the original film we were supposed to get. The original film, this film with Wolfman, was supposed to have Ryan Gosling starring in it. The whole story was completely different. And when all that fell apart and they recasted, they redid the entire story. And now the Wolfman we have for 2025 is what we got. And obviously many fans aren't resonating with it. Even though it made 20 million, that's still, I don't think, enough for a film that was supposed to, in some ways, many people were saying, kick off this monsters universe again, which it doesn't seem like that universe of like the Monsterverse can ever really get kicked off right, because it's been attempted multiple times and keeps failing. Now, I know we have Del Toro's Frankenstein coming out in November, but that's coming right to Netflix. I don't even think it's even getting a theatrical release. So again, I'll keep an eye on this, but I don't see this being a good thing for horror films going into 2025 unless there's just something that just blows everyone out of the water. I think The Substance could have been one of those in 2024 had it had a wider release. I think it could have been something that would have been a success in theaters. But I'm a bit surprised on some of these that's the big drop off in its second and third week. So again, could be a bad sign for horror films again for 2025. All right, so the last thing I want to cover off on, and many people don't follow this, the Golden Claw Awards, which is at the UK and Ireland Awards to dealing with horror films. So again, I know a lot of people don't follow this. Let me zoom in a bit here so we can see the list. But something I wanted to just bring up and call out upon, because I think this is still an award show on award thing, because its focus is strictly on horror. I like these types of things. I think these things deserve more attention. So I just wanted to run through these real quick just so we could see for the 2025 award show for, again, the Golden Claw Awards, who's up for what. So we're just going to run through these fairly quickly. So for Best Horror Film, we have I Saw the TV Glow, Longlegs, Oddity, Strange Darling, and The Substance. Honestly, I think I see this becoming between Longlegs and The Substance. That's my opinion. I think The Substance could probably win this one. If you actually even go, side note, if you can go look up The Substance and see all the other award, like I don't want to call them secondary, but all the other award shows, whether they're festivals or these other award things, we don't really say hear a lot about outside of like Golden Globes, Critic Choice, Academy. They've been killing it as far as the nominations and as far as winning. And the fact, I mean, The Substance, I'm happy to see Demi Moore. She won Best Actress in Golden Globe, Critics' Choice, and she's been nominated for on the Academy for it as well. Now that she's won those two, I think I don't want to say a shoo-in, but I would be a little bit surprised if she doesn't win Best Actress for The Substance at the Academy. And if she does, I think it's been great thus far for the horror genre that The Substance has won at those two awards. But if it wins at the Academy and I think it has five nominations for Academy Awards. If it wins one or even more, I think that's going to be a great thing, not just for The Substance, but also for horror, because I think at this point, these premier award shows need to start taking horror a little bit more seriously and maybe even create a category for it, because at the Golden Globe, Demi Moore won Best Actress for The Substance for the Best Musical or Comedy. And the reason it's placed there is because there isn't a category for horror. And I think there truly needs to be one. So we're going to run through. So Best Lead Performance. I'm not going to read all these off. I mean, you can see here for yourself. Let me zoom in a little bit more. I think, again, Demi Moore will probably win this one. Outside of that, I could see Micah Monroe for Longlegs. I would even like to see Sydney Sweeney for Immaculate. And I know many people didn't like Immaculate. I did. I thought it had a pretty interesting twist that I don't think many people saw coming. So I enjoyed that one as well. I think even Hugh Grant for Heretic could win. I think it's one of the very few times we've seen Hugh Grant play a role like that. And I love seeing actors and actresses who typically play the good role, the hero role, step out of that and play more of the villain role or the bad guy role. So I think Hugh Grant could easily win for Heretic as well. Best Supporting Performance, as you see here. I'm surprised to see Dennis Quaid here for The Substance. He was in The Substance, but he didn't have really a big enough role, in my opinion, to be the best supporting performance. So I'm surprised he's there. Now Margaret Qualley absolutely killed it. I think she is well deserving of that as well. Sophie Thatcher for Heretic. Even Nicolas Cage, I'm surprised to see him here, because again, his role in Longlegs wasn't that big, and I don't know if it was really that impactful for me to say he would be the best supporting performance. But yeah, him and Dennis Quaid, I'm surprised to see on this list. Dan Stevens, I could see that one as well. Even Blair Underwood, Longlegs. Longlegs is on here 3 times. I'm just not seeing that for some reason. I think there's other people on this list a little bit more deserving. Best Director. I would have to go with The Substance. With this list, I'm not trying to be biased here, but I would go with The Substance. I mean, I've seen all these films, and I would say that either The Substance or even I'd even say Jane for I Saw the TV Glow. I think those would probably be the two that I would say for Best Director when I'm looking at this list. Not to say these other films weren't good, but I'm trying to think of uniqueness and something that really stood out. Those would be the two I'd go for. Best Screenwriter, I would go with either Heretic or... this would be hard. I would say Heretic, Substance, or even Longlegs. I think it could go either way for one of those three. More than likely, it's going to boil down to Heretic or The Substance, I think. Best Visual Effects, I think this has to easily go... I'm not putting Alien Romulus on this list. While it does have good VFX and SFX, I'm looking for something very unique here, right? So I'm definitely going with either The Substance. The only thing that Violet Nature has going for it was the yoga kill scene, right? Outside of that, I was disappointed within Violet Nature. I was looking forward to that. I was looking forward to seeing a film like this, especially when I was trying to play off a little bit of the old school slasher film, but seeing it now from the killer's perspective. When the trailer dropped for it, I was hyped for it, but when we got the film, I felt very disappointed. And I think after the first 20 minutes, I was trying to reevaluate my life choices. in watching that film. I came back to it later on, finished it. Again, it was still very disappointed, but the fact that that film uh, got a green light for a sequel, I think within the first week or two, was absolutely shocking to me. I didn't expect a sequel at all, and then let alone it getting a sequel within the first, I said like 1 to 2 weeks. So again, very surprising about that. I'll check out the sequel again because I'm willing to give any horror film or TV series a chance. But so far, I'm not bought into the first film. Whether or not the second film is any better, we'll have to wait and see. But I would say for this one here, even for Smile 2, I would say I'd say from this list, Smile 2 or The Substance is what I would go for this one, for that category. Best horror film non-English. Ooh, this is a tough one. Exhuma. I would go with that one, or Mads. I would go with one of those two. I thought those two. I haven't even come across too many people, even in the horror genre. Even like my peers who cover horror on a daily basis on their channels. I have not come across too many that have seen these two yet, and it could just be a matter of there's so much out there to watch and try to catch up on that they just haven't gotten to them yet. But I try. I mean, for me personally, I try to do a mix of watching current horror films mixed with some of the ones I'm still trying to catch up on, just so there's a nice mix of things that come out a few years ago versus things that come out a couple months ago. But these here, I would boil it down to those two would be my pick for best horror film and not in English. Best kill. I think this list does have it. Yeah, the yoga kill in A Violent Nature. So I would say, I mean, the chainsaw in the shower for Terrifier 3, that was a pretty gory kill, but I think it was. I think there were. I don't want to say there was too much of the kill. I wonder how much of the kill was necessary, in my opinion. Now, Rock Meets Baby and Immaculate. If you haven't seen that film, I'm not going to say exactly when that happens. If you have seen it, then you know when it happens. And much of it, it's left to the imagination. So I am going to spoil it because Immaculate's been out for a while. If you haven't seen it by now, I'd be surprised if you have been able to avoid spoilers for any of these films. But when it happens, when Sydney Sweeney, because Sydney Sweeney is the one that does the killing for this particular scene, you're looking up at her committing the kill. So you're not necessarily seeing Rock Meets Baby. You're not really seeing that happen at all. It's left to your imagination a bit. But the fact that that's what the scene is supposed to be portraying, that's what's happening in the scene, I think between that and the yoga kill will probably be. I think the yoga kill will probably come out on top just because of. I think it was a kill you haven't really seen much of that type of kill in slasher films. I think it's going to come between that or the chainsaw. Honestly, the chainsaw. I can see the chainsaw in the shower for Terrifier 3 happening just because of how graphic it was and how much time was devoted into that kill. I mean, from the whole shower scene from beginning to end, from the time when Art pulls back the curtain and pretty much starts the kill right there, and then the kill moves out of the direct shower out into like the shower like floor area, and then it just continues. I think that's what's probably going to win this for best kill. I would be surprised if Acid Blood Kill, Baby Meets Table, or Rock Meets Baby is even considered. I think it's going to come down to Yoga Kill or Chainsaw in the Shower, but ultimately I think it's going to go to Terrifier 3. Best British or Irish horror film sponsored by the Independent Horror Society. I say either Oddity or Stop Motion. The other three, I especially Daddy's Head, I didn't care for. Daddy's Head had a great concept. For me, it just didn't deliver on the concept. I did a movie review on this one not too long ago, and again, while I felt there was something there, I just didn't feel like it delivered on what I was expecting it to deliver on. So I do think this one will come down to either Oddity or Stop Motion. Those two seem to be the ones that stand out amongst this list. So Where are these noms from? So, little perp. This is for the UK and Irish Golden Claw Awards. So the Golden Claw Awards is specifically for horror film, like horror films itself. So, yeah. So if you, I'll scroll back up to the top real quick since you just joined. So here on the site you have like the past 2 years, and then you have here the current year as far as who the nominees are for each of these categories. So and then you can see who won in past years as well. But yeah, so like I said, this is for the Golden Claw Awards. It's a UK British thing for horror films. So as far as Best Feature Debut, I think we're getting close to the end of the list here. So Best Feature Debut, again, we're seeing. I don't Blink. I'm Blink. I'm even surprised. I saw Blink, and I watched it once. Didn't make much sense. Watched it again, made more sense, but I didn't care for it. But the fact that Blink, I think, is the highest rated horror film, even I think on Amazon Prime lately, the fact that that's the highest rated one, I think says a lot as it relates to horror films and the fact of what horror films are being watched. I don't even think that for me breaks the top 10, and the fact that it's here for Best Feature Debut. And I know they're looking at the actor and actresses here, but for this list here, personally for me, I'm going with The First Omen. If you haven't seen The First Omen, and that might be a bias there for me because the Omen franchise, like the Exorcist franchise, are two of my favorite outside of my favorite being Halloween. The Omen franchise I think is great. The one film in the Omen franchise I didn't like was Part 4, which was the made-to-TV movie where you're not following the story of Damien anymore. You're following the story of somebody of this little girl, because in the original films, Damien was a little boy in the first one. He was a young adult teenager in the second, and then he's a full-on adult in the third film. And then they did the made-to-TV movie as the fourth. They then tried doing the reboot with Julia Stiles. So the fact that I love The First Omen, because I was hoping by the end of that film they were somehow going to tie it to the original Omen film, and they did, because the baby at the end of the film we know is Damien. So I love the fact that they did tie that in, and I really enjoyed The First Omen. So I'm hoping that we do see that there. So Lil Perp says, Omen isn't my franchise at all outside of the original. First Omen is a masterpiece when it comes to studio horror prequels. What a debut! Lil Movie Perp, I absolutely agree. I 100% agree with you. Now, obviously, it's one of my favorite franchises, but I completely agree with you as far as when it comes to a studio horror prequel. I thought it was a great prequel, and we've seen that attempted a lot of times with other films. Or other franchises where they try to do prequels and they completely fall flat and they don't do any justice to themselves as a standalone film or as an addition to the franchise. Now, I just did two reviews on a franchise, Satan's Slaves, and the way they did it was it's an Indonesian horror film. So there's Satan's Slaves, and then they did a second one, Satan's Slaves Communion. So I did a review on both those films. The crazy thing is that the Satan's Slaves was considered a minor remake / prequel. The original film came out in 1980 or 81, and Satan's Slaves was now meant to serve as a prequel, which now would move it as the first film, and then Satan's Slaves Communion would then serve as the second, with the original one done back in, correct, that's the individual, yes. The one back in 80, 81, it would now be considered the third film in that franchise. So when they start messing with things like that, I think it's a bit much. Let me see here. Communion would make a great double feature with Evil Dead Rise. I never saw the original. I haven't seen the original yet. I'm still trying to track down the original, even as a hard copy, because I happen to have a region-free Blu-ray DVD player. So I can, order from any region, and then just on the remote pick, what region lock it's on, and then watch the film. So I'm trying to see if I can even find a physical copy of the original so I can see it, just as a comparison to the two that have recently come out. So, All right, so yeah, so for best feature debut, I'm all for as far as the director for The First Omen. Best horror TV show. Ooh, wow. I think this could be very subjective here. I love True Detective. Now, as far as Night Country goes, wow, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I'm even really sold on that one, to be honest. Now, as far as so I'm going to take True Detective Night Country off the list for me. Again, I'm not. I know Jodie Foster. I know many people like her role in that, how she's acted in that. It's just not for me. I've tried watch. I've watched it. I've tried to. I almost like forced myself to like it, but I just couldn't. Now, I think this will boil down to either From or the Creep tapes. Now, if you didn't know, the Creep tapes it was just recently put out there, I think yesterday or the day before, that they're getting a second season of that. And I think and it was even also recently announced that they're putting the Creep tapes out, the first season on Blu-ray and 4K. Which, if I were you, if you're into physical media like me, I'm not gonna buy that. I'm not gonna. I mean, unless I'm worried about it going out of print or them not doing a potential box set, which in most cases that's what's gonna end up happening. They'll do season two. Season two will get a physical release, and then if they end the show there or in the series there, they'll do a box set, and now more likely you're gonna want the box set. So. Let's see here. Little movie perp says, "No Evil. Too bad no Yellow Jacket season last year." Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. So yeah, it's unfortunate. I think some. I would love to know what goes into some of these decisions, right? As far not so much for the nominations, but as far as moving certain TV shows further along, not deciding to cancel them, or even saying, hey, we're gonna delay these for any length of time, right? I've always been interested to know those details. I mean, obviously we will never know, but that's another topic. So but so for this best horror TV show, I'm thinking it's going to come down to either From or the Creep tapes. That's my opinion. I think more people now are talking about the Creep tapes even more so, and I know this isn't going to be based on what's the talk of the town. I do think that the Creep tapes, though, will probably win this one out. All right, so I think the last one we have here for technical excellence. Wow. It's interesting how this one is set up because each one is not being compared to really the same thing, except for Mads and Strange Darling. So Chime is being put on here for sound design, Long Legs for score, Mads cinematography, Strange Darling, cinematography, and The Substance for production design, makeup, and costuming. If they're not being compared based on the same things, if I'm looking at this, I think that's going to come down to honestly The Substance, and the reason I say that is because of the practical effects for the bodysuits. Now, if you go back, I think technical excellence. Yeah, I think this might be something that's not out there quite a bit. So you're going little movie perps going with Chime. So I want to say Chime, but so where I'm going with The Substance is the practical design for the bodysuits that were done. Now, if you haven't seen them, there were two things that were put out when The Substance, like when the hype was really going. So Demi Moore had put out there on her Instagram post a few pictures of the full bodysuits that she had to wear for like the later scenes in the film, and so I don't even know how to judge this. Yeah, I agree, and the reason I'm having a hard time judging this is because they're not all being judged on the same thing. Like if they were all being judged on cinematography, then I think that'd be an easier comparison, or sound design, right? Each one is in technical excellence for something completely different, except for two of them. But again, if I'm having to choose between this based on what's listed, I'm gonna go with The Substance because again, of the practical bodysuits that we saw, not just the pictures, but they eventually put out there a quick snippet of the special effects designer who was leading up the team. He put out there was a minute and a half behind the scenes video put out there, and I know there's supposed to be a broader 15-minute one put out there. It gives a bit more detail. It shows how the suits were made, the fact that Demi Moore had to wear them. I think you don't see that very often anymore, whether that's horror films or films in general. When it comes to things like that, they lean more to, CGI work or what have you. You don't see a lot of actors and actresses putting on full bodysuits, right? As far as to play a role, especially a disfigured body, full body that we saw Demi Moore having to portray, and the fact that that's a full on bodysuit that she had to wear. I think that's where they kind of edge out cinematography, score, and sound design because of the amount of work that was put into it and how then it's portrayed on screen. And I mean, it was a big part in the role and making of the substance, right? So I think that's where they're going to edge these other four films out on technical excellence. Not to say again, if we were being compared across the board amongst the same things, again, sound design for Chime, I think we would be having a different conversation. Same thing with score and cinematography, but yeah, of what I have to use to compare it, I'm going with the substance, and I think that's all they did for this year. Yeah, see, as you can see in previous years, they had a lot more categories. So those are the categories and the nominees for this year's the Golden Claw Awards. A little movie preview says Mark Qualley also had prosthetics that blended amazing. You could tell, but her one parts. Yeah. So if you didn't know this, little movie perp, Margaret Qualley actually came out in an interview and said that the prosthetics that she had to wear, especially for her face, caused severe acne on her face, and it couldn't get healed. It took almost a year for it to get healed up completely. And she said that the fact that she had that severe acne on her face played a role, so to speak, in the next movie role she did after that. So that played into the character that she was now doing in her next movie role. But she had said it took about a year for her face to fully heal and recover from the prosthetics that she had to wear for the substance. So yeah, it's pretty crazy. So yeah, so again, everyone, that's the categories, nominees, and my best guess as far as who I would like to see win for each one of these categories. Again, you can check out this list and again the list for the last 2 years on horrorcritics.group / awards. Again, this is for the Golden Claw Awards that takes place. It's a UK Irish award thing, strictly focused on horror movies and TV shows. So, all right, everyone, that's going to do it for today's show. There are just, like I said, just a few topics I wanted to run through, a few theories I had for how Roman and Stu are going to be used in Scream 7. My theory on what's happening at the box office when it comes to horror movies. Again, we're seeing this happen. We have numerous examples of it happening. It's just a matter of, will we now see this continue to happen? If it does continue to happen, again, I see this not being a good thing for horror films in 2025. So anyways, that's going to do it for today's show. I want to thank you for all those who jumped in the chat. It was great interacting with you all, and I want to just say thank you to all the subscribers to the channel. I do appreciate it. We are closing in on 500 subscribers, so if you haven't done so already, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. We are very close to that milestone, and drop a comment in the comment section after taking a look at the Golden Claw Award nominees for 2025. Let us know who you think you would like to see in some of these categories, especially for best horror film. I'd be interested to see what everyone thinks. Otherwise, we will see you all at the next one. Peace.